In 2014, when I was 13, I finally decided to listen to Metallica's entire discography. Metallica is a band I've been a fan of since I was a little kid, back when I used to listen to music my dad had saved onto his computer. I instantly fell in love with the first four albums. Those are my favorite four Metallica albums, not a hot take at all, I know. But I was already very familiar with those first four albums because a lot of the songs I listened to as a kid were from those first four albums. I never cared for Black Album all that much, yeah I know, sue me, and I don't mind Load and Reload as much as most people do, sue me again. But then I made it to a Metallica album that's far more hated and universally agreed upon to be their worst album in their entire discography, Saint Anger. I never heard a single song off of this album before I decided to dive into Metallica's discography, but I was still scared because I already knew that this album is so hated, people trash on this album all the time. I was even almost contemplating skipping this album entirely and moving on to Death Magnetic, but thankfully I decided to give this album a go, and I didn't hate it. And even to this day, I still like this album. Is it the best in Metallica's discography? Fuck no, far from it. I'd like to know if there's anyone out there who does consider this to be Metallica's best album. I listened to this album once in 2014 and then kind of forgot about it for a few years, until 2018 when I developed kind of an obsession with this album. Not obsession in the sense that this album is so good that I have to hear it over and over again. Yes, I did enjoy this album and still do, of course, but I was more obsessed with trying to figure out why exactly people hate this album so much. I mean, there's the obvious, the snare drums, the bad production. The horrendous production in And Justice for All never ceases to piss me off because there is a fantastic album buried under that horrible fucking production that excluded bass for whatever goddamn reason. I don't even listen to the actual album anymore. For years I've been listening to YouTube uploads that have bass added to the tracks. But for whatever reason, the bad production in Saint Anger never bothered me. Even the snare drums. For me, it added to the album's theme. Raw, unfiltered anger. There have been times where I have a shitty day, and then for at least some catharsis, I blast songs like Frantic that have a raw, fast-paced, unapologetically angry sound to them, and I feel somewhat better. I know that isn't going to sway people who already dislike this album, as that is entirely a personal experience, but that's just how I feel towards this album. I've seen some people say in the past, if you have to be in a certain headspace to enjoy this album, then that's a failing on the album's part, because music should be enjoyable, regardless of what headspace you're currently in. To an extent, I agree, but at the same time, I don't see that as a failing on any album's part. If an album perfectly encapsulates how you're feeling, and that's what makes you finally appreciate an album for what it is, I don't see that as a bad thing at all. Albums are an extension of human emotion. If an artist is going through a rough patch in their life, they are more inclined to make an album expressing negative emotion, and vice versa. Of course, this isn't always the case, but we've seen countless examples of horribly depressed artists making albums that are expressions of their inner workings. And this extends to the listener. People are more inclined to listen to music that encapsulates how they currently feel in the moment, and for me, when I'm pissed off, sometimes I crank up songs from Saint Anger, and it's cathartic for me. Again, I know, personal experience, but I'm more of what you call a casual listener of music. I gravitate towards music I like, and Saint Anger happens to contain music I like. I don't really get super analytical with the music I listen to, besides maybe song lyrics on occasion when I want to know what a song is about, but aside from that, if I just like the way an album sounds, then I enjoy it. That's enough for me. And not to mention, this album was made during a tumultuous period in Metallica's history. James Hetfield was either just out of rehab or was about to enter rehab when this album was recorded, and they just lost their bassist, Jason Newsted. So if nothing else, this album provides me an interesting glimpse into this dark period in the band's history, and when put into context, the raw and dirty sound of this album and this album's theme makes sense. For me, this album is a solid expression of what the band members were feeling and what they were going through during the time they were recording this album, And again, this may not be enough to sway people who already dislike this album, but for me, I like the glimpse into the inner workings of the band members during this period of time. This video wasn't meant to change the minds of people who already hate this album. I know plenty of people who hate this album, both in real life and online, and I know nothing I could say could sway them. I just wanted to explain why I personally enjoy this album, and I also wanted to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Metallica's most polarizing effort. Yes, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of Saint Anger. I know I already made a defense video for this album back in 2018, but much like most of my videos from back then, it was shit, so I wanted to remake it. Oh, and as an aside, I never minded the song Purify. Is it the best off this album? Fuck no, but I think this album has much worse songs, like Shoot Me Again in My World. I can never get into those songs for the life of me. Oh, and one more thing, and this has nothing to do with Saint Anger, I know, but I'm kinda warming up to Lulu. But that has more to do with me being a Lou Reed fanboy. Maybe that could be a topic for a future video, I don't know, but for now, happy 20th birthday, Saint Anger. I always thought you were way overhated, and I will gladly still blast the songs that I enjoy off of this album. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna blast Frantic right now. That's my favorite song off of Saint Anger, and I've always unapologetically loved that song. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye. You live it or lie it.